Okay, so pretty much in this video, I'm going to be going over every single sin affinity or just stats in this game, along with like what they're kind of used for and like what status effect goes with them. Because like most of them, like for example, envy goes like pretty much 1-in-1 with charge. Like a charge build literally requires envy, and envy just like picking envy requires you to be going a charge build. They literally like go together perfectly. Keep in mind, this is just kind of my basic understanding of each of these stats, so not everything I say is like 100% fact, but I do know at least a decent bit, and I've researched most of this, and I took a lot of this just off the Trello, so if I'm lying too, the Trello is lying too. Quick note, just in case you didn't know, uh, somehow, you have to like double click onto like the skill passives once you meet like the stat requirements for them. So just make sure you do that. And some passives will lock you out of picking other passives. So just I would use the Trello to make sure you know what you're doing. And yeah. Okay, so the first of these 7 stats is Wrath. This stat is like main passive effect is that you as you like HP lowers, you will begin to deal more damage, and this is proportional to like how much you have invested into Wrath. So if you invested very little into Wrath, it's not going to be noticeable, but if you invest a lot, it will be like a pretty decent damage buff. Um, the majority of like the passive skills are related to being around like low HP and or damage buffs. Like for example, the first passive Battle Ignition makes it so if you hit an enemy more than like 5 times in a span of 3 seconds, you get like a nice like 10% or 10 to 20% temporary damage buff. Um, Only status effect that really goes like with flame or with wrath is flame due to the passive inner ardor, which makes you apply more flame status effects proportional to like your emotional level. But yeah, that's the only really status effect buff that this gives. Okay, so next up, this segment's probably gonna be pretty short. It is desire, and to me, this is literally just the stat that you go if you are making a bleed build. Um, it does have 2 passives that like give you extra light in combat, which can be pretty useful. But literally, the rest of all of its passive skills just apply more or just utilize bleed in different ways. Um, the main passive buff that this stat is that you like apply. We don't know how much, but you apply more like status effects proportional to the amount of points invested to like enemies. But yeah, if you're going desire, it's just go like a bleed build. Okay, so third up is sloth, where the main passive is pretty much so every point that you invest into sloth lowers your speed by I think about zero point 0.1, or that's what it said on the Trello, and then increases your damage by about 0.2%. So at 45, it's about 9% damage buff at all times, and I think 4.5 speed lowered if I'm doing math correctly. Um, Most of this like stats passive skills have to do with either like blocking or stamina or like staggering your opponent and maintaining just like a lot of high amount or maintaining higher amounts of stamina within the fight. Um, the main status effect that this stat buffs is tremor, since it has 2 passive skills that I'll show on screen right now that inflict a lot more tremor, especially if you block break opponents. And it also has just like a few other moves where it or skills that make it very easy to punish and really punish staggered enemies. The fourth stat up is Gluttony. This is very similar to Desire, where it has kind of just one main purpose for builds. And pretty much its main like thing or passive is that it increases. It's just a flat increase to your base regen based on how many points you have invested into it. But yeah, the main thing it is associated with is Rupture, since literally all 5 of its passive skills have something to do with Rupture. So yeah, this stat is mostly just recommended. I guess you can go it a little bit if you want some extra regen, but it's mostly just recommended for any Rupture build because it'll be a major addition to your build. Okay, so fifth up is Gloom. This is one of the best stats in the entire game, in my opinion, which pretty much revolves around keeping like your sanity lower for the most of the fight. In return, doing a lot of more damage. A lot of these like skill passives, like the ones I'm showing on screen right now, will give you like damage buffs or help in maintaining lower sanity to keep your other damage buffs up. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure there's one where it gives you like a 20% damage buff if you're at like minus 25 sanity. And then there's another one where it, like, every 3 points under 0 sanity you are, it gives like a 1% damage buff. Like, so that's like 35% damage total if you're at like negative 45. And another thing is this build stat is very useful for any build related to like sinking, as it applies a lot more sinking to your opponent and can help it apply to you if you want to lower your sanity so that you can keep up your other buffs. In addition, this does have a lot to do with ego, like its main buff, I'm pretty sure, or like main passive that you just get naturally, is it extends like your ego duration. And overall, this stat is just very strong and can provide substantial damage buffs and just an overall great build. So sixth is the stat I don't think I literally have ever used, and that is pride. This stat's main passive is it gives you like a little bit more clash power. It's about 15 points equals 1 extra clash power, so 3 at max, which can be somewhat useful, obviously, just in winning more clashes. However, it does seem to me that this main use of this stat is primarily for its various poise-related skills that can help in maintaining poise throughout a fight. And in addition, it also can be nice because it has a low like stat requirement for its highest skill, only at 30, which means you have 15 or 20 extra points you can just invest in other stats if you don't really care about getting that extra 1 clashing point. Okay, so the last status effect, the one like I mentioned earlier, which you should never go unless you use a lot of charge, is envy. Its main passive applies more positive status effects to yourself, but literally everything else related to this stat is just charge related. Every single one of its moves either required charge to do a buff to you or something like that, or just applies charge to you or your opponent so that you can build up your charge counter. Meaning it practically has 0 other uses other than just going a charge build. But that's going to be all for this video. Subscribe if this helped you or you just enjoyed the video. It helps me a lot personally, and I hope you enjoyed this video and it can help you in creating some builds.